everybody and welcome back to my channel. In this video, we are gonna set up our bullet journals for March. I have many spring appropriate decorations and ideas to share with you, but first, let's flip through the previous month in case you were wondering how I used some of the pages and to see how everything ended up looking. When we reach the next empty page, let's start walking through my March cover page. So I always like to change up the style and the vibe of my monthly themes, and this month I went with a pretty minimalistic, kind of soft and cute theme that I think suited the springtime perfectly. So I started this cover page with our first drawing for this video, which will be this cute bunny that has a flower crown on its head. I saw some pictures with tiny bunnies wearing flowers and that was just too cute to pass. So I started this by very lightly sketching the outlines and the main shapes with a pencil. I also used some time to find the places for the eyes and the ears and then just trying to get the overall shape right. I think I've mentioned this in the past, but in my opinion, bunnies and all of these furry animals that don't really have any specific shapes or angles in their body tend to be the most challenging to get right. You really have to trust your reference pictures and also the process, and it might be tempting to add almost too many lines and shapes because you feel like there's nothing on your paper. I also wanted this bunny to be almost white, which made things even more difficult because I couldn't add almost any lines to its body. But after I was happy with this light sketch we have, I started to add color to this. I used watercolors, but you can use any coloring technique you're comfortable with. So again, I tried to keep the colors super light and you can't even really see the first layers here on camera. I used really light gray to start with and I just wanted to add the tiniest bit of color at once. I focused most of the gray around the bunny's eyes to create some shadow there, and then I added some around the edges of the body, then to the ears and also around the mouth. I darkened the eyes a few times and eventually I colored them black using my black pen, but I decided to not add other black lines to this drawing to keep the end result more soft like this. I think it's really hard to create a soft, fluffy appearance, which is why I tried to avoid using too harsh lines on this drawing. Now judging this much later, I think I might have added a little bit more lines to this drawing, but it's okay, I can add them in there anytime I want. Lastly, I colored the flowers with these pink tones. I didn't really try to create any specific flowers, so I just basically created some random shapes here to resemble this flower crown. I actually came back to this drawing a bit later and made some final touches to it. Sometimes it's super easy to get blind to your own drawings and it's really difficult to tell what it needs and what is off after you've spent a lot of time on it. So if you're struggling with that, coming back to your drawings later with fresh eyes is really helpful and it lets you to judge it much better. Anyway, now that the bunny is done, we can move on, and you can probably guess I wrote March on the next page. I feel like my handwriting is getting more and more minimal every month, but this month I purposely tried to keep it even more simple than in the past. Then underneath the title, I created this small calendar that we can use later while setting up the rest of the month. So that's it for our super simple and minimal cover page. I know this is borderline too empty, but I decided to move on nevertheless. And before we start setting up this springy monthly page, I'll tell you a little bit about this month's sponsor, who is Wix. I've been so happy to work with them, and Wix gave me an amazing opportunity to build my own website. So Wix is a website building platform that allows you to build highly customizable professional websites. They also provide a coding platform, marketing tools, and advanced drag and drop tools for you to create a beautiful website super efficiently. You can create a site for almost any purpose, so a blog, art portfolio, online store, you name it. I created a personal website that I'm also gonna use as my portfolio and blog in the future. For me, creating a website helped me to kind of combine everything I'm doing in one place that I'm completely in charge of. I really enjoyed designing the layout in the Wix editor. Having a total creative freedom was the most important thing for me, and I could definitely create exactly the type of website I wanted. I also have this section for some free bullet journal printables on my website, and I just added some more options in there that you can download and use on your own journals. So if you've been thinking about creating a website, you can go to wix.com/go/journalaway to create your own professional website. Thank you so much for Wix for being a supporter of my channel. It really means a lot. And now let's finally get back to our journals and start setting up this monthly calendar page. So I started again by writing March at the top of this page. I used the same font as I did on the cover page to kind of tie everything together. And then I started to draw the actual calendar to the bottom of this page. So we are gonna leave some room for the decorations here in the middle. The calendar was nothing special. I decided to keep this very simple style. I also tried to use very small font for all the titles and numbers because I think it's an easy way to add to this minimalistic look. You can use the space next to your calendar for anything that you personally need. I usually want to have a list of the content ideas for Instagram and YouTube so that I can track everything I've posted or worked on. But after that, let's move on to the decorations, and I decided to go with flowers this time. I know I rarely do any flowers here on my channel, but I thought maybe I could make a small exception this month since it really suited this theme. The reason I don't usually do flowers is, well, mainly because I feel like every possible flower theme has already been done, but also because I don't really like drawing flowers. I struggle with them, I don't know why, I just never really tried to learn how to draw them, I guess. So this time my initial idea was to paint some realistic looking flowers. So I started by sketching some here and then later started to work with my watercolors to color them in. However, I always want to keep it real with you guys, and this time I very soon realized that this idea was kinda too far outside my skill set and comfort zone. For me, a good measure for that is usually if I can personally enjoy the drawing process. And this time, I was just so frustrated with this the whole time. I felt like I had to be so precise and exactly follow some of the reference pictures, and that there were too many details that I just frankly decided to give up and try something else. That sometimes happens, and I feel like there is a very thin line between giving up for the right or wrong reasons. Almost all drawings have that point where you're feeling like it will never work and your sketch looks horrible, but then in the end everything kind of turns out okay if you just trust yourself and keep going. However, if you really feel yourself getting frustrated, I think it might be a better idea to move on to something else and just pretend the first try never happened. So I decided to start the whole thing again, and this time I used very different style for these flowers that was more on my comfort zone. I know you won't probably see much difference here on the video, but this time I decided to go with more abstract looking flowers. So instead of very precise details, I went with these messy, larger strokes. I switched to a bigger brush as well, and then I just kind of followed my imagination. So I trashed the detailed reference pictures and just kind of painted what came to my mind. And oh my god, what a difference all of this made. I still wasn't happy with everything in this picture, but at least I had much better feeling about it. It was much more relaxing and enjoyable for me, and I really ended up liking the end result when I finally attached this whole thing to my notebook. So yeah, I just wanted to share this whole experience with you because I think it's something we all go through when trying to improve our drawings or painting skills. Sometimes changing the approach or finding a different style that suits your preference and personality better might just be the thing you need. So yeah, I know we stayed on this topic for a while, so let's keep going now. I used double-sided tape this time to glue this thing to my notebook. I realized that this works really well to keep everything strongly attached, and that finally finished up this whole calendar setup. I really like the romantic vibe this spread ended up having, but now let's flip our way to the next page, which will be for the monthly planning of March. I didn't have a planning page like this in my February setup, but I have so much going on in March that I really have to prioritize what I actually have to get done and what can wait. I know some of you can feel me on this, but it's so easy to just add things to your to-do list, and before you know it, it's 2 kilometers long and there's no way you can finish doing all of them. So what I really found helpful is to set up these pages to prioritize the main things that need to happen, so I can also stop being so freaking hard on myself and learn to appreciate all the small victories. So anyway, I tried out these new styles of boxes, and I also added small shadows to them later using my light pink brush pen. So yeah, I know this page looks pretty boring, but it's actually so functional, and it's super helpful to have a page like this where you can come back to throughout the whole month. Then I wanted to add a slightly bigger decoration to the next page to compensate the lack of anything on the previous one. I wanted to draw some more bunnies because I found so many cute pictures of them. So on this page we will walk through drawing these 2 small bunnies together. I actually got the idea for these from one of you guys, so thank you so much for that. I love hearing your recommendations and ideas, especially for animals you want to see. I think this was a perfect idea for spring and Eastern, while still avoiding all the basic Eastern style decorations that I decided to skip this time. Anyways, I started by sketching these 2 with a pencil first. This time I tried to add slightly more details than I did in the cover page drawing to not end up with so white end result. The main details like the nose and mouth are pretty easy to draw since they are just these simple little lines. So if you like the idea of rabbits or bunnies for your spring setup, I highly recommend you to try these at home. It's not as difficult as it looks. I think the most difficult part, in my opinion, was again the coloring process. I found myself going with super light layers again because I was so afraid to go overboard with the intensity of the colors. I started from the safest places that were the ears and the neck part that was kind of covered with shadows. I tried to keep the overall color scheme pretty similar to this whole theme, so I added some different shades of gray and then some pink around the ears and the noses. After I was done with the watercolors, I felt like this needed a little bit more definition for some reason. I still didn't want to go in with black, so instead of that, I just defined some of the edges and shadows a little bit with my pencil. I know that's probably not the most professional approach, but I think for this it worked just fine. After that, I still wanted to add something to this page, so I quickly painted these splashes of color and then cut some small squares out of them so I could do this kind of color palette to the top of this page. This was a really simple idea that I think still added this sophisticated extra touch to this page. I also ended up adding the rest of the colors to the previous page because why not? So that was finally it for the planning page, and now we have something a bit more simple coming up. So first I wanted to bring back one of the spread ideas I used last year, and it was this weekly diary type of page. I've tried out all kinds of 2 lines per day spreads or 1 line per day, but I realized that writing something on a weekly basis works the best for me. I'm also going through a lot this month since I'm finally moving to Japan, so I really wanted to be able to write down my thoughts and how I was feeling and what was happening during this exciting time. I also drew these small rectangle frames and left them empty on purpose so I can add some kind of small drawings to them each week. Sometimes I like to keep my themes almost as a work in progress, so there's still something that needs to be completed throughout the month. I know this looks super boring and empty for now, but I'm sure it will look much different in the end of this month. Then we've reached the first weekly spread of March, and this time I decided to go with my 2 weeks on 1 spread layout. For me, it's visually super pleasing to see 2 weeks at the same time, and I realized that it's much easier for me to plan my schedule ahead of time when I already have the next week here. How convenient would it be, by the way, to have only 6 days in a week? I hate putting Saturday and Sunday together like this, but I do it to have more space on each day, so I don't really know how to solve that. Anyway, then let's move on to the top part of this page, where I first added a small monthly calendar, and then I left room for this simple sleep tracker that I'm gonna use as a line graph. My daily sleeping goal is currently 7.5 hours, so I added this pink dash line here to remind myself of that. Then I wanted to add my habit tracker to the next page, so both of these trackers will be for the 2 weeks that are on this page, and then I'll set up this whole thing again for the last 2 weeks of March. I also decided to update my habits a little bit. It's always more difficult to stay with your habits when you're traveling or moving or something. And also I guess it will take me some time to form new routines in my new home in Japan. So if you're going through something similar, I think it's really helpful to try to list something that you can kind of keep doing anywhere and just try to stick with few of the most important things. But yeah, I guess that finally finishes up our soft and simple weekly spread. I will skip 1 page that will be for the other 2 weeks of March, and then we can finally set up our monthly review page that I also changed up a little bit from my previous setups. I started this page by painting some more loose flowers to the top of the page. I quickly sketched the placements of the flowers and the branches a bit, and then started to work with my watercolors again. Whenever I use watercolors straight in my notebook, I try to use as little water as possible. Blending is a little bit more difficult, but if you work quickly, it's still possible. So this time I created these light pink magnolia flowers, I guess. And again, I started from the lightest layers of color. I slowly kept intensifying the colors and adding different shades of pink. I also mixed in some gray to get this dusty tone to some of the flowers. And as I did on my monthly page, I kept the flowers super loose. I didn't try to follow any specific picture or anything. So I was just having fun with these and basically created what came to my mind. I also added some smaller just dots of pink, so it looks like there are some flowers in the background. And then lastly, I drew in the darker branches. First I used these gray tones and then I intensified them a little bit, especially the branches that are closer to the viewer. This ended up looking better than I expected, and it gave really pretty look to this whole page, and I really liked how this came together. So now that the flowers were on their place, I started to work with the actual setup around them. So I first wrote the monthly review title on the first page, and I especially liked how this title matched with the flowers. Then under the title, I started to create this grading system that I decided to try out for the first time this month. So I have some different things or areas of my life here, and then I'll give a grade from 1 to 10 according to how well I think I did on that area on March. So for example, happiness, stress levels, financial stuff, how inspired I was, and so on. My idea is to keep doing this same grading system also in the following months, so then in long term I can start to see some patterns and I can also compare different months with each other. I'm always fascinated to find some long-term effects of things, and this kind of table gives pretty good idea of how I was feeling during the month. Then underneath this one, I wanted to add just some open questions for myself to answer. Of course, I had to add a question about Japan, so how I'm feeling about everything after being there for 1 month. Maybe what were the positive things and what was difficult. So nothing special here, but it's still really helpful to take a moment for yourself to think about these things. But yeah, now that we are done here, I guess that finally finishes up the March layout. I know this is a little bit more simple, but as I said, I'm kinda in the middle of moving at the moment, so I couldn't spend as much time on this one as I normally do. But for those of you who enjoy more simple spread ideas and minimal style, I really hope this one gave you some inspiration. If this is the first video you're seeing from me, I would be very happy if you could consider subscribing to this channel to see more bullet journaling and art stuff in the future. And if you want to see even more from me and maybe some updates from Japan or something, you can also find me from Instagram. Thank you guys so much for watching as always. I hope all of you are having an amazing day or night wherever you are, and see you in my next one. Bye bye!